What's up Pythoners, this is Vishesh Dwivedi and welcome back to my channel all about Python. Guys, this is the second part of creating a real-time chat application in Python using tkinter module and socket programming video series. In the first part, we discussed how this chat application will actually work, and we created a server and client-side script which was successfully able to connect to each other. Now in this part we are going to discuss about adding messaging functionality onto our application so that client and server are able to communicate to each other through messaging, and client is able to send messages to multiple other clients and other clients are able to send messages to each other. So without any further ado, let's begin. So we are going to start off by editing the server script. Now in order to add the messaging functionality, we want our server to be able to handle each client that connects to it. So in order to do that, we will add a function in our server side script to handle client. So let me just write the comment first. Function to handle client, and then I'll write def client underscore handler. This is the name of the function, and it will have one argument which is the client. Now client here represents the socket object of client. The socket object of the client is the one which we receive right here. Okay, so whenever a client will connect to the server.accept method will return the client socket object, which we will use to connect to that specific client. So I have created this function here, and now in order to call this function I'm going to use threading. Okay, because we do not want that when this function is called, our server side script only runs this function. We want this function to run concurrently with our server side script. So I'm going to write threading dot thread. I had already imported threading in, as I told you in the previous part of this video series. So I'm going to write threading dot thread, and then I'm going to write target equals to client handler, and then arguments equals to client, and then start. So basically what I'm doing is I'm creating a thread which is basically this client handler function. So basically what I'm doing is I'm creating a new thread which will perform the function which this client handler function will do, and we are passing the argument to it, which is client. Now guys, make sure that when you are passing the argument, it should be in the form of a tuple, number one, and second, always have a comma and then a blank here, like not space is not required. It's important that you place a comma here. Okay, if you are not going to place it, this code will not work. Okay, so don't forget to place this comma right here, and then I'm like calling this start function to basically start this thread. So now every time a client will be connected, a new thread will be created and it will start, and that thread will keep running till the time the client is connected to the server. Okay, now let's come back to this function. Now before we add to this function, let me just create a few more functions that will be required as we move forward with this video. So send messages to all from underscore username and message. Now this message here is required for our server. Basically whenever we will call this message, this server will send the message which we will pass here to all the clients, telling that a specific username has sent a specific message. Okay, so when we call this function, this message will be sent to all the clients that are currently connected to the server, and all the clients will receive that message and then they can display it to the user. Okay, so let me write this comment. Function to send any new message to all the clients that are currently connected to this server. Okay, and now within this server, now before I write this, again I'll just write this function afterwards in this video. For right now, let's just leave it empty. and we will need one more function, and that extra function can be added afterwards. So for right now, let's just have these two. Now first let's start with the client handler function. Now if you guys have seen part 1 of this video and you remember how our script works, you would know whenever client will connect to the server, the first step would be that the client will send the username that the user will choose to the server, stating that this is the user who has joined the chat. So the first step would be for the server to actually listen for the message which will contain the username that the client will send, and then just get that username. Okay, so server will listen for client message that will contain the username. So I'm gonna write while one, then username or the message response would be client.recv2048.decode. Now let me just quickly explain what I have written right here. So we have the client object right here. It has a function called recv, which stands for receive. So basically this function is called whenever we have to listen for any messages coming from the specific client. Okay, so when we are writing this message, we are basically stating that okay, wait for any message that you may receive from the client. Okay, and 2048 here means the maximum size of the message. Okay, so 2048 is a big value, so we don't have to worry about the size of the username or something. So I would recommend to use this value right here. It's enough for the message. And finally we are using the decode function. This is because all the messages that are sent between client and server are sent in bytes form, like in encoding. So it's important for us to decode the message when we receive it, read it, and encode the message whenever we send it. So decode is basically used to decode the message that we will receive, and UTF-8 is the encoding that we have used to decode the message, because all the messages are sent with this encoding. Then if username not equals to empty, basically we are checking if the username is not empty or not. So if in case it is empty, we will just print client username is empty. This will basically give us an error that there is something wrong. And okay, so now if the username is not empty and we have successfully received the username, we have to do one thing. Now again, if there are multiple clients that are being connected to the server, we need to have some kind of list that contains, all the clients that are currently connected to the server. So I'm gonna create a list by the name active_clients, which will have a list of all connected users. Okay, all currently connected users. If we have received the username from client, then we can say that the connection has been successful. So what we have to do is add this specific client to the list of active clients. So we will do active_clients.append, and we are gonna add a tuple. The tuple have two values. First the username, that this is the name of the user who has connected, and then the client object, like client socket object, like this is the client socket object of the client who has connected. Now as soon as this is done, we have to basically keep listening for any message that we may receive from that client, and this thread that we want to run to listen for any messages from the client should keep on running, because let's say the server has connected to the client successfully. Now we don't know when the client will try to message the server. The user can send the message to the server anytime, whenever he likes. So the server has to listen for messages all the time. Like whenever the server is running, it will keep on listening for message from that client. And obviously if the client has disconnected, then there is no point. But if the client is still connected, it has to keep listening for any message that it may receive from that client. So we are gonna create one more function that is gonna execute as a thread, which will keep listening for any message from the client. So we'll just write listen for messages, and this function will keep on listening for messages. So we will write function to listen for upcoming messages from a client, and again we are going to pass the client here. And now basically let me just explain why this function is important, because for example, if a client sends hi, okay, I have this txt file right here in order to explain you guys how it happens. Let's say we have client with username all about Python and he sends hi. Now it's the responsibility of the server tell all the clients that all about Python username has sent a message hi. So basically when this function will receive any message from, let's say, all about Python, then it will send the message to all other users stating that okay, all about Python has sent this message hi, and you guys display it to your users. Okay. And one more thing that I want to tell you is the format in which our messages are going to be sent. Okay, so I have chosen this format. You guys can choose any format that you want. I have kept this format for simplicity. So all the messages that will be sent in this form. At the left we will have the username, who has from username who has created the message or sent the message. And then we will have this symbol right here, this small symbol. I hope you guys can see here. This symbol basically is not a very common one. So I am going to use this symbol to differentiate the username from the original message. Like I can write hi, hey guys, what's up? Okay, so now Python can know that okay, if this symbol is right here, the left side would be the username and the right side would be the original message. Now if you guys want, you can add many more things in it, like maybe you can also add the time when the message was sent, maybe 12:30, or maybe something like that if you guys want. And if you guys want, you can also not use this and maybe use some kind of JSON format or XML. It's all up to you, but for simplicity reasons I have used this symbol right here. And so now that you guys know how our messages are going to be sent, we can easily write the code for it. So again, first step within this function to listen for messages would be to add a while loop which will keep on running and listening for messages. So within this we will write response is equal to client.receive 2048. So just like in this step where we were listening for username from the client, we will write a similar code to listen for messages from the client, because again all of them are actually socket messages sent using socket, right? So again, just like the below code, and again we will check if the response is empty. So if response is not equal to empty, then we will do further processing. But if the response is empty, then we will simply just continue the loop, because if by chance this happens, then we don't want to do anything like that. Or let's just write a print statement stating that the message send from client is empty. Okay. And one more thing that I am thinking of is that we can add one more parameter here, the client and then the username. Okay, so what we will do is we will add this basically for our error messages. Okay, from client and then username. So at least we will know that we are not receiving any message from a certain username. Okay. And now in case if we receive a message, now as I told you, we need to send that message to all other users. So first we will create a final message in this format. So we will do final_msg would be first the username, plus this symbol right here and plus the response. Response here is the message. Let me just change the variable name so that it's easy for you guys to understand. Okay, so this will be our final message. So the username, this symbol right here, and finally message. Okay, now once this message is created, we will simply call send messages to all function, and from username and message. Now I've realized one thing, since we have already created this final message here, we don't actually need to pass the username here. So we can, if you guys want, you can we will just remove it, okay, because there's no need. We can simply write this message, and now this function is complete for us. Okay, so it will keep listening for messages. If it receives a message, it will create a final message and it will send it to all other users. In case if it does not receive any message or there is some error, then the message is empty, then it will just send like the messages sent from client is empty, and this loop will keep listening for messages. Okay, and now within this function we are gonna add a for loop. So for user inactive underscore clients, so basically we are iterating through all the users which are currently connected to this server. Okay, so for users in active clients, now send a message to all. Now we also need one more function to send a message to a specific client. Okay, so let's just create one more function, def send message underscore to underscore client, and then we'll write the message, and within comments we'll write function to send message to a single client. Now if you are following up with this tutorial, you might have seen that as of now we have only been able to receive messages, we have not sent any message. So within this function we learn how to send a message. So in order to send message, we will do is we will write client dot send all. Okay, we would also need the client, so I will just pass the client. So we will have these two parameters, client, the client which we have to send message, and the message that we have to send. Okay, so we'll write client dot send all, and we will write message and dot encode. Now message dot encode, now encode here is, as I told you, whenever we are receiving message we need to decode it, and whenever we are sending message we need to encode it. So we are basically encoding the message in order to send it. So this function encode is used to basically again encode the message, and we don't need to pass UTF-8 because that is like the default value. But yes, I would recommend you to pass it while decoding. Okay, you don't need to pass it when you are using the encode function. And that's it. I mean, this line by itself will send the message. Okay, so we'll again come back to this function send messages to all. So basically we will go through each user that is connected to our server, and then we will just call this function send message to client. Now user here, let me just tell you, we told you that within this active clients list we were storing a tuple. Okay, and that tuple had two values, username and client, and in order to send the message we need the client object. So client is the second value in the tuple, so we are gonna write user 1. Now we are writing 1 because we know that indexing starts with 0. So if we want this value, so it would be, this would be 0 and this would be 1. So we are gonna write user 1, and the message would again be this message right here. So we are gonna write message. That's it. This basically will send message to all other clients. Okay, now the last thing that we have to do, I told you that this listen for messages will keep listening for messages, and we just have to write this code right here. Now if we come back to a client handler, we already have taken the username from the client. Okay, and we have all added that user to the list of active clients. Also we will break this loop right here because again we have received the username, we don't need this while loop as of now. and below here what I will do is I will write threading.thread target is equal to listen for messages, and if you check the arguments, there are two arguments. First is the client, second is the username, okay, and then start. So just like I use the client handler function to create a thread and run it as a separate thread, similarly I am gonna run this listen for messages function as a separate thread, because again we don't want this function to affect our this loop right here, okay, server loop, because server has to listen for connections all the time. So let's just go through the functionality of the server, okay. We are gonna start off by, we have started by creating the socket, the server itself. We have configured its host and port, and then we have set the listener limit as to how many clients will be able to connect to the server, the maximum number. And then we have started the while loop, which will keep listening for client connections. Within this, we have used server.accept method to connect to the client and get its client socket object. And once we get it, we are gonna run the client handler thread, which will basically handle the client, okay. Now if we go back, if we talk about this client handler, then within this we have a while loop which will wait for the client to send the username, and once it receives the username, it will add that client to the list of active clients, and once it does that, it will start its listen for messages, okay, thread function. So listen for messages, basically what it will do is that if we click here, this function right here will keep listening for messages from client. If it receives a message and it's not empty, it will create a message which will state the username and the message itself, and then it will send the message to all the clients which are connected. Within this function will go through each and every user that is connected, and then it will one by one send the message to all the client. And if we go through this function has this code to send the message to the client using socket, okay. Now I hope you guys have understood it, and if you have not, you can just go through this again, and I hope you'll understand it. And also we have to write the client script, so maybe you would understand it a bit more when we write the client script. So now that our server script is completed, we can come back to our client script right here. Now this is the client script that we had created previously, and we are just gonna continue with it, okay. So I'm gonna write a new function here which will basically talk to the server. So we can write communicate_to_server. I think this name would be there. I wasted a lot of time in finding the name, I'm sorry guys. I'm just gonna write this here, and now within the client side we are gonna just call this function, okay. We don't need to add any threading or as such, because the client itself does not have any while loop that it has to keep listening to server. It will just connect to the server, do its job, and then it will just disconnect, okay. Now within this communicate to server, we are gonna pass the client socket, okay. Client.connect, okay. So within this we'll pass the client socket. Now just you guys understand, this client socket is this one, and this is exactly the socket that we receive on the server side. Where is it? Right here, okay. Whenever the server accepts, it receives the client object, which is exactly this object, okay. So now within the communicate to server, we know that we have connected to the client. Now if you check the client handler script, we know that the server will listen for the username from client. So as a client, we need to send the username to the server. So we are gonna write client dot, so first we need the username for the client, so we are gonna write username is equal to input enter username. So we are gonna ask the username from the user, and once we get it, if username is not equal to empty, pass. And in case if the user writes like it prints nothing, it will write username cannot be empty, and we will just exit it like instantly. Okay, and if the username is not empty, then we will write client dot send all username dot encode. So just like in this section right here, we were sending the message to a client. Similarly, here the client is also sending the message. Now in this case, the message would be sent to the server. Okay, so the server will like receive the message. Okay, and once the server receives the message, now if we come back to the server side script, then once the server receives the message, as you can see the server has received the message, it will start this listener thread. Okay, so now one more thing here is that just like the server has to listen for messages from the client also has to listen for messages from the server. So we need a function for the client side script to listen for messages. So listen for messages from server, and then we are going to pass the client object. And just like the code we wrote on the server side right here to listen for messages, we are going to write a similar script right here. So we are going to write while one message is equal to client dot receive 2048 dot decode UTF-8. This is similar to the code we wrote here to listen for messages, because that is the thing about socket. Like if you understand the basics, the most of the code is like pretty similar to each other. Okay, so again we will receive the message, we will check if the message is empty or not. If it's not empty, then there is like no problem. But in case if it is if the message is empty, we will just write a print statement stating message received from client is empty. Okay, now again the message was not, if the message is not empty, then what we need to do is to show that exact message to the user. Now before we do that, we need to see who we need to decode the message, because as I told you, the server will send messages to client in this format. So we need to like decode this message to get the username and the actual message. So what we will do is username would be message dot split this symbol right here, because this is the symbol that we want to split the message 0, and content or the message content would be message dot split the symbol 1. So basically what I'm doing is that I am splitting or dividing this message on this symbol. So basically what this will do is that it will create a like list or a tuple in this form, like this. The message will turn like this. Okay, and once it does, then the username would be the first object or at index 0, and the actual message will be at index 1. So that's what I'm doing. I'm receiving the username at index 0 and the original, like the actual message, in index 1. Okay, so then we can just write print. I'm gonna write username here, and I'm stating that this username sending message. Then I'm gonna write the content right here. Okay, so this will make sure that whenever server sends a message, it is displayed to the client. And we want this script right here, this function, to run as a thread whenever we communicate to the server. So I'm gonna write threading dot thread target equals to listen for messages from server arguments equal to client, because we are passing this client as a parameter right here, and then I'm gonna write okay. So again, just like I told you here, just like I showed you using threading here, we are gonna run this function as a thread, because again we want this function to keep on running, okay. And like we want this to like keep on running, so that whenever we don't know when the server will send a message or when any other client will send the message to server, so we need to this function to keep running all the time as a separate function without altering the actual functionality of the client, okay. So now that this thread is running, what we need to do is add a function or functionality for the user to be able to send a message, okay. So we are gonna write def send message to server, and then we are gonna pass the client object, and then we'll write a while loop so that the user can send as many messages as it wants. So it will be message is equal to input. I'm gonna write blank here, okay, or let me just write I'll just write like this, okay. If message is not equal to blank, if it is, just write print empty message and just like exit. For now we will exit. Afterwards, if we want, we will just like modify it according to our needs. Now this is done, okay. Now if we receive the message, we need to send that message to the clients to the server. So we will write client dot send all 2048, sorry, within this we will write the message itself, and then we will encode it, because we want to encode it and then send it in the form of bytes. Okay, so like this much should be okay. And again we will simply just call this function here, send underscore message to server, server, and then client, okay. And let's just remove this. I think this is like the function is complete. Let's just get an idea of the client script. We are creating the client socket here. We are gonna connect to the server. Once we are connected, we are gonna communicate to the server. Within this function, we will first send the username to the server. Once the username is sent, we are gonna basically start a listener thread, which will keep on listening for any message from the server, and if it receives a message, it will display it to the user. And then we are also going to call this function, which will allow the user to send the message to the server or to all other clients through the server. Okay, so I think our code is complete. Let's just try running it and see how it goes. So I'm gonna start with the server, because again, as I told you in part 1, the server should be running in order for the client to perform its function. Let me just remove it right here, and now I'm gonna run the client side script. Want to start another instance? Yes. Okay, so I want the username to be this. Okay, so okay, so it said successfully connected. This means that our user all about Python has connected to the server. Now in order to test it, we need to run one more client, because there should be 2 or 3 clients, to be able to communicate with each other and stuff. Okay, so let's just name it Vises. Okay, now if I check the server, as you can see, 2 clients have connected to the server right now. Okay, now let's say all about Python sends a message hi. Now again you can see that I have received this prompt right here which states that all about Python user has sent the message hi. Now if I check the other user who had connected by the name Vises, even he received the message from all about Python stating hi. Now let me tell you guys, these two are two different scripts running, but they both are connected to the server. So what's happening here is that all about Python user has sent the message hi, and the other user Vises received the message. Similarly, if I say hey what's up and I send it, so as you can see I get a message from, like, it states that Vises user has sent the message hey what's up. Now if I come back to the first user, the all about Python user, he also received a message from Vises stating hey what's up, which means my message from Vises went to all about Python, just like I want it to be. Now if you guys want, I can also, let's just for testing run one more client. So basically we will try to communicate between 3 clients, because again our server can handle up to 5 clients, so definitely we can do. Let's just name it test user, okay, and I'll send yo. Now a test user has joined the chat and now it has sent yo. So if I check the server, a third client has connected, which was our test user, and if I check the other 2 clients, you can see they received a message from test user. Guys, isn't that awesome? We literally created, in a way, have completed our messaging app. Okay, we are able to send messages, the other clients are able to receive messages, and to be honest, it looks really cool, right? Now again, by functionality wise it's done, but again I need to add a few things here. Okay, so let's just close this. Let's just close all these command like terminals. Okay, so now we know at least the messaging part is working fine. Now there are few more things that I want to add, like for example, whenever a new user is added to the chat, all the other users which are already within that server or in that chat should know that okay, there is a new user within their chat. Okay, like whenever you add someone in the group, it says that this added this to the chat, or this was added to the chat, something like that. So let's just add that message. Okay, so in order to do that, we have to go to our server script and let's go to a client handler there, this one. Okay, now we know that whenever we perform this step of active adding that client to our list of active clients, that that client is like officially added to the server. So we will just write one like message here, one line of code, send messages to all, because we want to know everyone, we want to tell everyone that this person has been added to the chat. So first we will create the message. Okay, so prompt underscore message would be okay. Now when it comes to the username, again I told you whenever a message is sent, it requires a username and it requires a body. So for username, I'm thinking we will just write capital SERVER, so it would look that the server is telling the clients that a user has been added to the chat. Okay, so we are gonna write like server here. I'm gonna write this prompt and then I'm gonna write here the name of the user, so like username added to the chat. Okay, and then it will send the exact message to everyone. Again, I'm using this function so that all the clients know that a new user has been added to the chat. Okay, so I'm just gonna save it and let's just test it again. I'm just gonna run this script. Okay, this server has started. Now we run the client script. Yes. Okay, so username I'll write all about Python and I hit enter. Okay, so again as you can see the all about Python user received a message that all about Python was added to the chat. Okay, so let's just run one more client script. Okay, and this time again let's name it test user, and I hit enter. So test user received this message that test user added to the chat. Now if I go back and check here, you can see that the All About Python user also received a message from the server stating that test user was added to the chat. So guys, this functionality is also working absolutely fine. And so this is basically the main structure of a chat application. Okay, this is how a chat application is supposed to work, and we can say that we have like covered pretty much all the stuff that was regarding socket programming here, because this is all the socket programming that is being used in order to communicate between the server and client. And with this I'm gonna end this part of the video. In the next part we are gonna like add GUI part to the client, because as you can see this interface is not very good looking. Okay, so we are going to use the tkinter module to add a really nice looking GUI, so that the client, the client will receive proper messages, the client will be able to send a message properly, and it's gonna look really good after that. So with this I end this video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you guys liked this video, because I'm soon gonna post the third part of this video. And battery is low, so it's time for me to go, and that's it. Have a good day.